In November 1964, the British government killed every passenger service on a working coal mining railway that had carried Ashington, Blyth, and Bedlington into Newcastle for over 120 years. The platforms were boarded up, the stations were demolished, one was buried under a supermarket, another became a car park. The coal trains kept rolling past every morning. On tracks the state had just told 86,000 people in those mining communities they were no longer allowed to use. 60 years passed, nobody got it back. Then one retired local, working alone out of a small users group that had been reduced to planting flowers at the boarded-up stations, did something nobody in the British transport establishment thought was possible. He started dismantling the 1964 decision from the inside, but something on the line started changing almost immediately. Within 5 years, he had council leaders on record. Within 10, the British government had been forced to put the line on a national reopening list over the explicit objection of transport authorities who had spent 6 decades saying the case did not exist. The money did not exist. The demand did not exist. On the 15th of December 2024, a new train rolled out of a new Ashington station with him on board. This is not a story about a heritage railway. This is the story of one ordinary local pensioner who dismantled a 1964 British government decision while every transport authority in the country told him he was wasting his time. The official forecast for year 1 was 704,000 passengers. The railway carried nearly 1 million. Before you can understand what one pensioner did to the British transport establishment, you have to understand the man who built it in the first place. His name was Richard Beeching. He had never run a railway in his life. In 1960, he was a director at Imperial Chemical Industries, overseeing the production of zip fasteners and paint. In 1961, he was running the British Rail Network. The salary was £14,000 a year, more than the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. 30 times the average British wage. The Daily Sketch put it on its front page. Is this man, or any man, worth £450 a week? A chemicals executive with no railway experience, no engineering background in trains, no operational knowledge of the communities the British rail network had been built to serve, had just been handed 5 years and one instruction: find the lines that don't pay, shut them down. His method was a spreadsheet. He stripped every line out of its regional economy. He ignored the freight on the same tracks paying for the passenger service to exist. He ignored the school commuters. He ignored the local industries built on the rail link. A line that lost money on its own ledger died. He killed 5,000 miles of railway. He shut 2,363 stations. He cut a third of the British network in a decade. And on a single morning in November 1964, he switched off the line that connected Ashington, Blyth, and Bedlington to the rest of the country. Beeching went back to ICI in 1965. He had been on secondment the whole time. The methodology he left behind did not go anywhere. For the next 60 years, every council, every campaign group, every local authority that tried to bring back a Beeching closed line was told the same 3 things by the same Department for Transport. The forecast model said the demand did not exist. The forecast model said the money was not there. The forecast model said the case could not be made. The forecast model was Beeching's. It had been wrong on the day he wrote it, and it took a pensioner from a flower arranging committee to prove it. His name is Dennis Fansett. He had spent his working life in London campaigning on transport issues, and in the early 2000s he retired north into southeast Northumberland, a corner of England where the coal had gone, the shipyards had gone, and the railway in the middle of the high street had been dark for 40 years. He went looking for the local rail users group. What he found was SENRUG, the Southeast Northumberland Rail Users Group, 12 members, average age over 70. Fansett later described its main activity, in his own words, as putting flower beds on station platforms. That was the entire opposition to Beeching's legacy in southeast Northumberland in 2005, a handful of retirees planting petunias. He thought it was not ambitious enough. Oh, and by the way, if you are still with me, hit that subscribe button now. What comes next is one of the most surgical takedowns of a Beeching closure ever achieved by a member of the public in Britain. And if you want to see what happened when the same playbook was tried on the highest steam railway in the Alps, the Furka video is linked below. Fansett's first move was not a press release. It was not a petition. It was not a march. He read the establishment's own paperwork, not the Beeching Report itself, the cost-benefit logic underneath it, the forecast model, the assumptions, the footnotes, and buried in the footnotes was a loophole the Department for Transport had been missing for 40 years. The The Blythe and Tyne had never stopped operating. The track was alive. Coal trains had used it through the 1970s. Biomass trains were still using it 5 times a day. The signaling worked. The bridges were inspected. The freight operator had been paying to maintain every mile of it for 40 years. Every objection the establishment used against reopenings elsewhere, the track is gone, the bridges have failed, the signaling needs replacing, did not apply to a single mile of the Blythe and Tyne. Reopening it did not require building a railway. It required switching one back on. That single insight changed the cost calculation by hundreds of millions of pounds. And it was an insight a retired campaigner with a printer had found before any professional transport consultant working for the Department for Transport had bothered to look. Fansett took it to Northumberland County Council. He wrote technical submissions in his own time. He produced cost-benefit analyses more detailed than the council's own retained consultants had managed. He gave the case to whichever councillor would listen, in whichever party would carry it. The Labour administration drew up an early plan. When the council changed hands, the Conservative leader Glenn Sanderson took political ownership of it and forced it through. By 2019, the council had pushed the scheme through Network Rail Engineering approval and put a funding application on the Department for Transport's desk. By 2021, the Department for Transport had committed £34 million. By 2023, construction crews were on site, AECOM delivering the design, Morgan Sindall building 6 new stations from scratch. On the 15th of December 2024, 60 years and 6 weeks after the last passenger train ran, the first new train rolled out of a new Ashington station. Dennis Fansett was on board. The pensioner had not just won the argument. He had reverse-engineered the spreadsheet Beeching had hidden behind for 6 decades. But the spreadsheet was not done humiliating itself yet. The official outline business case, signed off by the Department for Transport and approved by Treasury, predicted 704,000 passenger journeys in the first full year of operation. That number was the number Fansett had spent 20 years arguing was too low. In the first 3 months, the line carried 250,000. Northern, the operator, had built its rolling stock allocation around the official forecast. By the second month, it was already pulling extra carriages out of storage because trains were full at off-peak times the forecast had not predicted. By month 8, the figure was 500,000. More than half the annual forecast hit in 2/3 of a year. Northern began running 4-carriage Sunday services that had not been in the original timetable. Commuters were discovering they could now reach Newcastle in 35 minutes. From towns, the bus had taken 1 hour and 10 minutes to reach. By month 12, the figure was 920,000. Northern's commercial director confirmed the millionth passenger journey was expected within weeks. The official forecast had been beaten by approximately 40% in year 1. And the 2039 long-term forecast? 1.5 million passengers a year, the number the Department for Transport had said the line would only hit a decade and a half into the future, was on a trajectory to be hit 14 years ahead of schedule. A retired campaigner with no engineering degree, working out of a community group that had been reduced to platform gardening, had now produced more accurate transport forecasting for southeast Northumberland than the entire Department for Transport managed in 6 decades of refusing the same line on the same data. And that is the part the establishment cannot answer. This is the part that should make every transport authority in Britain uncomfortable. The Beeching methodology, the one a chemicals executive wrote in 1963 to delete 1/3 of the rail network, is the same methodology the British transport establishment is still using to refuse reopenings today. Same cost-benefit logic, same exclusion of regional economy, same forecasting models that confuse absence of service for absence of demand. The Northumberland line was a controlled experiment. The state had spent 40 years building its case for refusal using Beeching's methodology. It was then forced to test that case against reality. The case lost by 40% in year 1. It is on track to lose by several 100% over the line's lifetime. Every other line the British state is currently refusing to reopen, and there are dozens, is now harder to refuse than it was on the morning of the 14th of December, 2024. That is what Dennis Fansett did. The 1964 decision is no longer a closed case. It is an open wound the British transport establishment has to keep explaining. Every time another forgotten coalfield town picks up a copy of the Beeching Report and notices what a pensioner from southeast Northumberland already worked out, that the spreadsheet was wrong on the day it was written, and the people it had been told didn't exist had been here the whole time. If you want to see what happened when the same kind of state-killed railway logic shut down the highest steam railway in the Alps, and what a different group of locals did to bring it back over 6.5 kilometers of mountain, watch the FERCA video next. The link is on screen now. You will not look at state-killed infrastructure the same way again.